Is fashion art? The Metropolitan Museum of Art seems to think so because the 2026 Met Gala theme this year is those three words: fashion is art. But what I want to know from you guys is, do you agree? Do you believe that? Is this just some marketing strategy, or is this just another expensive party and excuse to wear crazy clothes? Because truly the question of whether or not fashion is art is not a new one. Designers have debated it, artists have debated it, curators have debated it, fashion professionals have debated it. And on the first Monday of May, a room full of celebrities are going to dress like they have the answer. I'm going to break down everything that's happening for the 2026 Met Gala. We're going to talk about the dress code, of course. We're going to talk about the exhibition. Those two things can be very different. We're going to talk a little bit about the co-chairs, and we're going to follow the money behind the major event. And finally, I'm going to give you my answer to whether or not I think fashion is art. Spoiler alert if you've watched any of my other videos. Every year, the Met Gala exists to fundraise for the Costume Institute. That's literally the fashion wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Being an FIT graduate and a fashion professional, I've spent a lot of time in that wing of the museum. And every year, there's an accompanying exhibition that opens up very shortly after the gala. This year, the exhibition is called Costume Art. And I want to be precise about what that means because there's a distinction here that I think a lot of the coverage is going to miss. Costume Art, the exhibition, is going to show over 400 objects across the Met's entire collection. Not just the fashion archive. We're talking garments placed aside paintings, sculptures, artifacts from every department within the museum. The curator behind this, Andrew Bolton, has described it as an epiphany that he's had. That the dressed body is literally front and center in every gallery of the museum. If you walk through the Egyptian wing or the Greek and Roman galleries, the European paintings, clothing is literally everywhere. It's been the central focus of art since forever, since the inception of art. The exhibition is essentially making the museum's point of view visible. Let's talk about this dress code. Fashion is art. Just like last year, I want to make sure I note that this is very separate from the actual exhibition. It's a creative brief on what guests should show up wearing. There's a lot that you can do with that theme. The dress code is asking the guests to sort of embody that feeling with what they decide to wear. As we know, every year, some guests are going to nail it, and some are just going to wear something expensive and beautiful and call it art, which honestly may be the point of this whole thing. Now, the co-chairs of the gala is always a story in of itself. But this year, I'm really excited about the co-chair lineup. They're not just celebrity bookings, they are calculated choices that reflect the theme, and it sends a message about who the Met thinks gets to define what fashion is. So this year, we have Beyoncé, we have Nicole Kidman, and we have Venus Williams, with Anna Wintour, as always, as the institutional anchor. But let's talk about each of the co-chairs. And of course, I'm a little bit biased. I am a card-carrying member of the Beehive, but I do feel like the choice of Beyoncé this year was definitely a deliberate choice. Here's the connection that I made as soon as I heard the announcement. Now, y'all know Miss Tina been doing this wearable art gala for years now. Is this literally Miss Tina's wearable art gala in New York City? I don't know. We'll have to see. Beyonce's mom, Tina Knowles, has been running the wearable art gala for the Waco Theater Center in Los Angeles. This is a real institution that's been going on for years. It raises millions for arts education and youth mentorship, and its entire premise that fashion and wearable art are worth taking seriously as cultural expression. Tina Knowles has literally gone on record to say that she wants everything to be art. And that is their family's institutional position. We see it in early costume designs for Destiny's Child. We see it in everything that Beyoncé does. We see it in all the projects that Solange works on. The Knowles family does not need the Met to tell them that fashion is art. They've been funding that argument for years. So when the Met picks Beyoncé as the co-chair for this specific theme, they're acknowledging that legacy, that lineage, a family that's been making that case through action. that Black creativity and fashion expression belong in the conversation about what art is and who gets to make it. So let's talk about Nicole Kidman. Nicole Kidman brings a different sensibility to this trio of co-chairs. She's been one of the most deliberate fashion collaborators in Hollywood. Her relationship with Balenciaga, Armani, and just truly the way that she approaches fashion as an actor using costume as presence and a method to transform. And that correlates to exactly what the Met is asking guests to do on the red carpet. And lastly, let's talk about Venus Williams, which I think is probably the most layered of the three. Venus does have her own fashion line. She's also studied fashion design, and she's been at the intersection of athletic wear and fashion for a really long time. But more importantly, she represents the body in motion. In her case, the fashion has to be performed, not just observed. While most of us just wear clothes and appreciate them, for Venus, the clothes actually have to perform. That's actually one of the oldest arguments against whether or not fashion is art. It's on your body. It has to do something. Venus Williams, in many ways, embodies the counter-argument that the body in motion, dressed intentionally, can be one of the most powerful artistic statements there is. 3 co-chairs and 3 different arguments for why fashion is art. So let's just talk about Jeff Bezos and his wife being the honorary chairs and the lead sponsors of this year's Met Gala. And yes, this has raised some eyebrows, but let's talk a little bit about the facts. First, what does it even mean to be an honorary chair? Honorary chairs and lead sponsors are usually the biggest financial contributors to the event. They're not doing any curation. They're not choosing the dress code. That's truly the job of Andrew Bolton and the Costume Institute. But they are providing the financial foundation that makes this whole event happen. Last year, the gala raised $31 million for the Costume Institute, the most in its 77-year history. The year before that set the record before it. As you can see, the trajectory has been sharply moving upwards. Corporate and high net worth giving is part of how that happens. But the part that I think people feel is a little tricky is that the Met is an institution that rests on its independence, the ability to make decisions based on scholarship and cultural significance rather than commercial interest. When the lead sponsor of your annual fundraising event is one of the richest humans in history, some people might challenge, does that create influence? Does that money come with some sort of expectation? And that's a legitimate question to think about, but it doesn't lie only with the Met. Art institutions throughout history have had to navigate this relationship between philanthropy and editorial independence. I mean, the Medicis were sponsors of the Renaissance. Corporate naming rights are on the buildings of every museum in the world, just about. What's different now, I think, is the scale and the visibility. Jeff Bezos is not an anonymous donor. He's loud. Him and his wife has been spotted all over Fashion Week in Paris and in Italy. His presence at the gala, literally on those steps in front of the Met, that in itself is making a statement. Whether that statement aligns with the Met's mission of fashion is art is not for me to decide. And whatever you think about who's writing the check, the result is something that we all benefit from. For fashion exhibitions at scale, so all those fashion students, all those upcoming buyers, all those research analysts or costume professionals that need to research, this will have an impact on how we learn about fashion in the future. And again, I'm not here to make any particular statement or opinion about the corporate sponsorship, but I wanted to make sure that we're clear in understanding what we're building and what that money is actually going towards. Now that we got through all the fun stuff, let's talk about my opinion on whether or not I think fashion is art. And when I thought about this question, the first thing that popped into my mind was I wanted to think about how we consume fashion versus how we consume art. As I mentioned earlier, one of the main arguments against whether or not fashion is art is truly because fashion is functional. It's on your body. It has a job to do. You can't just hang it on a wall and walk away. And the other side actually argues that that's what makes it powerful and what actually makes it art. It's the only art form that you literally wear. It embodies your daily life in a way that a painting or a sculpture could never do. Imagine walking around with a Magdalena Dundo sculpture all day while you're commuting to work. As somebody who's been in the fashion industry for a really long time, here's my position. Let's take an original Salvador Dali painting. You guys know that I love Salvador Dali. His works of art are in a museum. Most of us will never own an original Salvador Dali, let alone be in a room with one, unless you're fortunate enough to travel to St. Pete, Florida, and go to the Dali Museum. But we can buy a print off Amazon. We can buy one of his artworks on a coffee mug or even in a cell phone case. And most of our furniture stores like your Ashley's and your Room to Go sell artworks that are inspired by some of the greatest artists in history. No one looks at that Ashley furniture print and questions whether or not Salvador Dali's work is truly art. The commercialization of the original doesn't retroactively strip it of its artistic status. The print exists because the original had enough cultural power to generate that demand at every price point. To me, fashion works exactly the same way. A Jonathan Anderson Dior couture gown is a singular artistic creation. Yes, it might cost 6 figures. Most of us will never be able to wear it, let alone be in the room with it. But that design, that silhouette, that idea, it trickles down throughout the entire fashion system. Trust me, as a merchant, I know this to be fact. It shows up in Zara as an interpretation. It even might show up in a Target capsule. It could show up on how you decide to style yourself on a Tuesday. How many of you have drawn inspiration from Jonathan Anderson's latest Dior Couture show and maybe have started donning the flower based on the flowers that he showed on the runway? I ask you, is that not an artistic expression? The existence of the mass market version doesn't mean that original couture piece wasn't art. It means that that art has strong enough cultural resonance to generate demand at every access point. And let's talk about street fashion. You can't be from New York City or LA or Hong Kong or Tokyo and not see how people express themselves through fashion and not call it art. Most of us will never see couture in real life, but through museum exhibitions, we can. We're not going to the runway shows. We're not in those rooms, but we can go to the Met. We can go to the Brooklyn Museum. We can literally stand mere feet away from a Balenciaga construction from 1957 and study how the shoulder was built. That's the same thing we do with a Rembrandt. We study it. We analyze the technique. We talk about what it meant in its time and what it means now. The fact that one hangs on a wall and one is physically on a body doesn't change the intellectual and the cultural engagement we bring to it. So yes, I think fashion is art. And take that with a grain of salt because I don't think all fashion is art. Not every fast fashion drop or trend cycle it piece qualifies as art, but yes to the intentional creative works. The pieces where a designer is asking a question or making an argument or merely just responding to the world we live in. That to me, hands down, is art. 100%. Yes, the industry around it is commercial. The distribution is commercial. The way that most of us access it is commercial. But that's true for every art form that's ever scaled. Music is commercial. Film is commercial. Publishing is commercial. We don't use that argument that none of those things are art. And I think, again, it's just one of those things that is a juxtaposition, a yin and yang. I think the Met is right. Fashion is art. And the truth is, fashion has always been both things, beautiful and commercial at the same time. That might just be the definition. So with that, the Met Gala is coming and I'll be watching it with my full chest. I always argue with a manager and a bartender at a bar that is always playing sports. I would like to create a space where we can go, we can have some cocktails, and just take in the fashion. But I'll be watching specifically because I want to see how Beyoncé takes on the theme, with her mom, Tina Knowles, being an artist in her own right. I know that it's something that we're going to be watching for years to come, and it's going to end up on a lot of people's mood boards. I also want to see how the guests in general just navigate this fashion as art dress code. It could go either way depending on how serious it's taken. And I actually want to see what the exhibition looks like when it's open. I can't wait to get to New York. Y'all know I don't play about my intersection of fashion and art. If you haven't already, take a look back at my video about Jonathan Anderson's inspiration for Dior's collection from artist Magdalene Odundo, or my video about how Rachel Scott drew inspiration from Wilfredo Lamb, a Cuban artist, or the correlation between Schiaparelli and Salvador Dali. I generally want to know what you guys think about whether or not fashion is art. I want to know who you guys are looking forward to seeing on the red carpet. I want you to come back after the red carpet and tell me who you think was best dressed. I also want to hear who you think is worst dressed, even though I'm not one to gossip. Again, I believe in art and self-expression, so as long as there's a message behind the outfit, I'm usually pretty forgiving. But I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions, so definitely feel free to use my comment section as the area to express your thoughts on how people showed up to the red carpet. And for those of you who love my content, I'm super excited for season 2. So I hope you're ready to go down this windy road of fashion and news and business and art. I'll see you in the next video.